Alright, so this is finally the final video with our little pixelated Mario friend. So let's take a look at what's going on here. You've already seen this image folder several times, but I've never opened it up for you. So let's see what's inside. So we have a Mario.jpg, and we've got this guy here, but I'm not actually using either one of these. If we open him up and look, he is quite a bit bigger than this is, and you can see some noticeable pixelation. So if we make them about the same size, or even if I make this guy even bigger, you should definitely see pixelation, because you see it here. If I look at the other image, this is actually the same file. I just renamed it. And that was originally in this one here that I later deleted him out of. I think I showed this to you in one of the earlier clues where you could see him and the pixelation difference. Now I also have this little thing here, and if we open it, there's nothing there. But actually there is. If I zoom in a whole bunch, you still don't see anything. But if I open it up in Photoshop, there is actually something here. And if you read the file name, 1x1 transparent.gif, these were super common. Like, everybody used these from the late 90s through probably the early to mid 2000s. And here it is. Now if we zoom in to 3200%, this is what we're looking at. This is exactly 1 pixel. Just one. If I make my brush 1 pixel, that's this. And if I do file save for web, that's what we're looking at. It's 302 bytes. Well, let's change this to an actual GIF. There we go. So now you can see it. It is colorless. It is this transparency here. When you see these little checkerboards, the white and gray, that means it's transparent. Unless you want to be mean and make an image that actually looks like that to fool people. But this is transparent. And so why is that important? Because let's look at what we're doing. Let's actually look inside the source code of these files. So if we open the first one in the index.html in TextEdit, we're looking at this guy. Remember, he's 20 KB, and as I highlight, you can see it jumping over the individual pixels. But as you've probably already noticed, it's a table. It's a table filled with little 1x1 transparent.gif files, each one set to a certain size, specifically 15 by 15. And so that's what these are. These are little blocks, 15 by 15, of that transparent GIF. And behind them is a color. Except for these first few, there is no color here, which is why we could change the backgrounds and the background would change. I could have made little squares that were of these specific colors that I wanted to, but then I would have had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5? I think 5, yeah. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And I guess 7 for transparent. Different images I would have had to make. That also would have increased the file size, because right now it's just loading the exact same transparent GIF all of these times. It's not having to load a different one. It's just using that same one, and so that's not too bad. That's a whole lot faster than your computer having to load all the different ones. Now each one's only a pixel, so it still would have been super fast, but it's also man hours. I would have had to spend more time creating each individual color, whereas now that one little transparent GIF can be used with any color behind it. And so this transparent GIF is being used as a spacer. And this was not common. We didn't do this in the late 90s, but we used this little transparent GIF to make things certain sizes inside of tables all the time in the late 90s and early 2000s. By the early 2000s we should have stopped, but we didn't. We kept doing it even though there are better things to do for various reasons. We'll talk more about that later. So you can see here, this is a row, and here's that row, and another row, and etc. So that's what these are. Each one of these is one of those little bitty blocks. So what about the other ones? How did I knock this down to be only 12 when this one was 20, and they looked the exact same? So let's look at this in TextEdit. So we have another table, but notice, instead of having all of those rows and columns before in TextEdit, let's just put them side by side so we can see them both at the same time. Instead, I've deleted a bunch, and to help myself know which ones I've deleted, I've put these little comments in here, so that way I can kind of visualize it. And it's just for me. It's just to help me. And by doing that, I've deleted a lot of extra text, and that difference in text makes the difference between the 20 KB and the 12 KB. Now we're only talking about KB, so this is still extremely small. 20 KB is minuscule, but I was able to shrink it down by like a third of its actual size, and that's pretty significant. If you're making a web page and you can shrink it down by 33%, that's great, especially if you're looking at developing a website for maybe a third world country, or for mobile development, or for maybe a population that doesn't have as high-tech technology. So it will be faster, load faster, they're more likely to actually see it. In addition, some parts of the world, a lot of parts of the world, don't have unlimited internet. They have to pay for how much bandwidth they use, for how much data they transfer. So being able to shrink your code down is great. Now, there's even still one more. This one's even smaller. This was at, I believe, 8? Yes, 8. Actually smaller, not even 8. Let's look at the difference here. So it's the same, actually, as this, but I've deleted the column, the comments. I've deleted my comments. So the comments are there to help me, and they're great at helping me because I was really able to visualize this. I left the white space in here to sort of help me still. It's a little bit more confusing for me, but on the plus side, I was able to cut this down to, I was able to cut it down by another third, well, a third of its current size at 12. So from 20 to 8, so less than half of its size previously. So that's pretty great. Now, of course, I could have just used Mario earlier as the PNG or the GIF, and they were super small, so that would have been even more efficient. But you know, it wouldn't have been as interesting of a challenge. So what's actually going on here? It still might be a little hard for you to visualize what this actually looks like, what's going on with these tables. So to make it easier to visualize, let's add a border, and let's add some cell spacing. I think that's all I want. I don't think I want cell padding. Let's save it and take a look. Actually, let's increase this a little bit more just so it's super obvious. So here we go. This is that table, so you can see all the individual pixels. Let's take a look at the difference in 2 or 3. Remember, 2 and 3 are the exact same thing. I just took the comments out to shrink it down even further. So let's open this in TextEdit, and let's once again add a border 3 and a cell spacing 3. And just to prove they're the same, we can do the same thing with index 3. Marvelous. So now if we open index 2 and index 3, you can see these are the same. And so I was able to shrink them down significantly by, well, 1, combining them into call spans and row spans, but then by 2, by deleting the comments that I was using to help me sort of plan it out and figure it out. And this was actually pretty challenging. It was pretty challenging to block these up into chunks and do this. It took quite a bit longer than I expected. But if you really want to, I mean, you can go for it and play with it some. The first one, this guy over here, this was pretty easy. It was a little tedious, but it was pretty easy. But these are much more challenging. And it was interesting, too. One of the reasons modern design has actually abandoned tables was sometimes it does really weird things. I sort of did the bottom first because it was these big chunks. And then I did the top all the way down to about here, and everything was behaving normally. until I did these last little parts here. So I had everything else. I'd done this, and I kind of I just ended up meeting here between going from the bottom and then top down. And when I switched these, I originally switched them into col spans instead of row spans, so sideways instead of up and down. And that actually made this go a little nuts. He ended up like stretching his arm out and his leg out and even his face a little bit. And it's just sort of weird. Tables sometimes behave weird, and so it was elongating parts of him. And so if I deleted that col span and row span, then all of a sudden it would go back to normal. And if you notice, every single column in here has either a row span or it has a single dot, except for these two until you get here. And when I deleted those individual dots and I didn't make them into col spans, I made them to row spans instead, it just made this go weird. And why? It's kind of hard to explain why. But I mean, the gist of it is tables sometimes are unpredictable and do strange things, and that's sort of why they've been abandoned in modern web design. But it's still important to know how they work, because a lot of systems still use them, like our website and even Canvas. You can build things inside of Canvas, inside of your posts and whatnot, using tables, but they don't let you use the new stuff, the new div tags and all of that. So it's important to understand how they work. And it's important to know that sometimes they just go a little weird. So to show you, I'm actually going to show you, I don't know why I'm just telling you, let me show you what it did. So this is number 2, and I'll just edit number 2, and I'll leave number 3 alone so you can see the difference. I should open that back up so I can actually see where I'm editing. So this is row 1, 2, 3, well, let's count from the top. Oh, we can do count from the bottom. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, because it starts at the top. So I'm looking for 5 from the bottom. So 14 is the bottom, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And here are my row spans. So let's get rid of that. Let's change this to a col span 2. And I will copy that. And I will paste that right here. Nope. Where is that? Here it is, right? Right. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. I think this is it. I think I just labeled it wrong. I don't know. We'll see what happens. So paste that there. And then should say col span right there now. And paste that there. Save it. Let's see if this works. Hopefully I didn't screw it up. I forgot to switch the sizing on these, because they're at 30 height and they should be at 15 height, and they should be at 30 width to get the spacing right. Attention to detail. And this one too. But it looks like I hit the right ones at least. Alright, so we've saved it and we refresh it. There we go. So if we compare, notice what happened to him. It's increased this part. Look at how much thicker it is. It's also increased, well, not exactly increased. This is not straight anymore. It's like all slightly off, like the distance. So this should be like a whole 15 pixels over, but it's not. And so it created this weird thing. And that's one of the issues with tables, is they don't always behave the way you'd expect. Oh, I wonder what I left off there. It's not supposed to be there. But yeah, interesting. So there you go. You know the solution. You've seen a little bit of it. We've expressed or shown the different ways that I can do it, and even some of the issues and why modern design doesn't use tables anymore.